Elias Grayson did not like silence, but it was silence that greeted him at night in the glass penthouse, where the city seethed below like an alien aquarium. The phone flashed a short line. CFO's plane has disappeared from radar. Likely to crash. His inner world shook as if an invisible floor had been pulled out from under him. Jeremy was not just a CFO. He held the skeleton of the Grayson capital empire, knew all the seams and cracks, knew where the sins were walled up. "This is a mistake," Elias whispered into the void, but the void did not answer. The calls poured in like an avalanche. Lawyers, editors, former partners, even a morning show reporter to whom he had once sold his human profile for an hour of exclusive. "We are praying for you," wrote those who had only yesterday prayed that he would make room for them in the funds. He pressed the end call button and looked at the dark glass, where the world of the city was broken into geometry. "Everything is under control," he told himself. But the voice in his chest answered differently. "You missed something." At 3 a.m, the concierge handed over an envelope without a return address. Inside was a cheap flash drive, wrapped in a green strap, like those on old-school notebooks. On a piece of paper was a strange, but mechanically familiar handwriting. "You forgot the price." He connected the media, and the screen lit up with catalogs with laconic names: Banyan, Ledger, St. Moses. His fingers froze over the trackpad, as if they had touched the cold skin of a snake. "Elias," Jeremy's voice sounded in his head. "If something happens, you have to see everything as it is." He opened Ledger. Columns with dates, payments, aliases of structures. The sums were not those that had been transferred through official channels, and the recipients were charitable foundations with impeccable websites and dead phones. In a second, the path burned from Nexus in the Caymans to a small clinic in Kansas that was buying equipment that no one was using. Somewhere in the shadows of these movements, a name flickered that he hadn't seen in 15 years. A name that began with an H. The doorbell rang. The darkness had turned bluish in the early morning, and the sirens below were calm as waves. Behind the armored glass of the cell were 3 faces, 2 suits, one the polished humidity of the state. "Mr. Grayson," the man with the badge said, "Federal Bureau. We need to talk about your friend and some foundations. It won't take long." Elias glanced at the monitor. "You forgot the price." He understood. Silence was not a pause. This was a sentence that had already been pronounced. And for the first time in years, he didn't know if he wanted to open the door. He did. The air from the hallway was cold as a knife's edge. The empire he had built with the belief in his own infallibility had cracked. In that crack came a whisper. "The price is you." By noon, his name was a tag. By evening, a meme. The news channels that had once carried his portrait as a model of success now pieced together his biography into a puzzle of crime, laundering schemes, influence on grants, shady political contributions. Partners retreated like water before a storm. His former Stanford mentor, Senator Harold Halcombe, the H, issued a cold statement. "I know nothing about the internal decisions of Mr. Grayson's private foundations." Colder than that phrase was the memory of the man holding his shoulder on the day of the first check round. "America loves a winner, Elias. Just don't show the seams." "You're saying Jeremy played by himself?" the FBI agent asked, warily examining his kitchen, where the countertops glowed sterile. "I'm saying that sometimes the mechanism takes on a life of its own," he replied. "But not without my shadow." The trust filters were breaking down publicly. His ex-wife sent a short message, "Don't involve your son." Investors demanded access to the servers. Auditors found glitches, amounts that disappeared for an hour and returned a cent more. The press painted him as a target, from tech messiah to hypocrite. Worst of all, a message from Jeremy's mother. "You were his brother. Tell the truth. One sentence is enough for me." That night, he reopened the Banyan. There were notes, meetings at a small restaurant in Arlington, notes from Jeremy, short, terse, emotionless. H asked to speed up. Channel through St. Moses is clear. Objective, buying the silence of the families of victims in the Astra 9 trial. Elias remembered Astra 9, a pharma startup he had joined in the early stages to save the world. The reports had good intentions. The letters had other words: tolerant side effects, targeted payments, termination of claims. "You knew," he whispered to his reflection. "You didn't look so you wouldn't see." There had been a break-in that morning. The SEC had frozen a key account. The bank security service he had fed for years now spoke slowly, like a doctor at his bedside. "We're working with the government." The lawyer who had always said, "We'll win," said, "We can mitigate the damage." The conversation with his son had broken into pixels. "Dad, at school, they showed a video. Is that true?" Elias stared at the blank frame and couldn't form a sentence. When he stepped out onto the terrace, the city was just as shiny and just as alien. Jeremy's plane had been found in the water. The data boxes hadn't. An anonymous source in the press had hinted at sabotage. The doorbell rang again. But this time it wasn't the government or the investors. It was a woman in a worn leather jacket who had been taught by time to keep her back straight. She said only, "I know what he wanted to show you. You can't do it alone." And there was no sympathy or fear in her voice. Only the sense that the galaxy in which he was a hero actually belonged to other laws, not his gravity. And that falling wasn't the end. It was the beginning of the reckoning. Her name was Mia Salazar, a former intern at Grayson Capital who had left when she was asked not to ask any questions. She hadn't signed an NDA. "Your lawyer was smart, but I'm stubborn." At a coffee shop on the outskirts, where the barista knew her name, she pulled a crumpled black notebook from her canvas bag. "These aren't digital copies," she said. "These are originals from Jeremy's paper double-entry accounting." He knew the numbers would be overwritten. "Paper, no. There are payment routes, names of supervisors, reserves in case someone falls out of the sky." "Why are you here?" he asked, feeling awkwardly ashamed of how easily his assistant had once removed her from the incompatible database. "Because a woman on my street had a side effect, and the St. Moses Foundation bought her silence." She didn't need silence, she needed a doctor. "And I know how to pick up the pieces of history." They sat over a notebook, as if over a map of an unfamiliar city, where every street led to the same block. The codes from his flash drive matched the signatures in the notebook. On several pages were the initials H, G, meeting dates, and circles marked live. Mia told me about St. Moses, a small parish fund in Texas, turned into a funnel for donations that never reached the temples. On the next page was the Banyan plan. If the CFO left, the Grove server would activate the self-destruction of the default logs. The data boxes from the plane were bait. The main thing was not stored there. Where then? Elias rested his finger on the word Grove. "Where you would never think to look," she smiled sadly. "In your charitable scholarship platform. You hid mushrooms in the garden, Elias. And the garden was watered by children." They returned to the penthouse, and for the first time he let someone in without registering for the code. Mia worked quickly. A VPN bridge, an outdated admin login that seemed to have been left specifically for a rainy day. They opened Grove, and everything unfolded like a box with a double bottom. Jeremy's voice notes, excerpts of correspondence with a senator's assistant, draft contracts with Astra 9. In one audio, Jeremy spoke with surprising warmth. "Elias, if you can hear this, we've crossed the line. I thought I was controlling evil in moderation. It's controlling us." "He knew he was going to be eliminated," Mia said. "This is not an accident. This is a warning to you. You're the key." "Why should I believe you?" he snapped, his anger covering his fear that every decision in his life was a trap for others. "Don't believe it. Check it out," she said. "But when you check it out, you'll have a choice. And it will hurt." Late that night, they found a letter marked live, a meeting schedule at an intimate club on the Georgetown waterfront, where philanthropists discussed politics, hiding deals in crystal glasses. Halcom was supposed to be there. They were supposed to hand out instructions on how to turn Elias into a lightning rod and dust Astra 9. He closed his laptop. "If I go there, I'll see that it's really like that," he said. "If you don't go, the same thing," Mia said. "But you'll lose the chance to stop being a set piece in your own story." At the end of the night, he sat in the darkness, listening to the city. Suddenly the silence seemed not a sentence, but a space before a step. He finally knew. The truth was not on the other side of the wall. It was inside him, like a pain that could not be soothed by medicine. And this discovery turned the world upside down. It was not the system that had eaten his conscience. He himself had rented it out. Time to break the contract. The Georgetown club smelled of expensive wood and faded political promises. Elias walked unguarded, a micro camera glowing a cold under his lapel. Mia waited in the van across the street, her fingers on the keys like a pianist preparing for the darkest sonata. The room was crowded and quiet. Quiet, the kind of quiet that belongs to no one here. Halcom was on the dais. His voice caressed the audience. "We have to protect the narrative. Elias." The senator leaned over as they all broke into smaller groups. "Nobody wants you to get hurt. You'll just take the hit. In 6 months, you'll come back with a different, cleaner one." Heroism is the right story at the right time. "Heroism without truth is marketing," Elias replied, and it sounded like he was saying it out loud for the first time. "And our truth is rotten to the core." Halcom smiled, like a teacher whose child had told a story inside out. "Don't be an idealist. America loves second chances, but only for those who play by the rules. Our rules." At that moment, Mia whispered into the earpiece, "The recording is coming. Keep it on the hook." Elias took a step closer. "You destroyed Jeremy," he said, "to save Astra, 9, and your committees." The senator's eyes flashed with metal for a second. "Accidents happen. The more we build, the more dust in the air." "And the children," he blurted out. "Are their lungs your dust?" "The children will grow up." A cold pause. "And you risk losing everything now. Here it is, a framework of choice. Stay rich and empty, or go out into the storm." Elias removed his lapel, where a dot was flashing. Halcom saw it and momentarily lost his smile. "All or nothing," Elias said. "And I choose all. But not yours." He switched on the live feed from Mia's laptop, on an open channel where thousands were waiting for the sensation. Jeremy's recordings went on the air. The Grove spreadsheets lit up with surfaces, chains of payments, letters, voices. The club went wild like a hive of activity that had been doused with cold water. "You've signed your own sentence," Halcom hissed. "I've already been given one," Elias replied. "I've come for another." The security moved, but there were already agents at the door. Different ones this time, not the ones who come to talk. Mia brought up the call signs, IPs, backups to secure vaults. All or nothing became all that's left, and it suddenly wasn't about money. After that, there were interrogations, reports, cold rooms without clocks. He was offered a deal. "You're a witness, we're mitigation." He took it, stripping himself of the myth of inviolability. His son wrote, "I saw it, Dad." It was bitter and light at the same time. The scales were teetering, but for the first time they stopped where he wasn't afraid to look at himself in the mirror. And suddenly it became clear. Loss is not a minus, but a space for something heavier than wealth. For conscience. The public confession didn't bring Jeremy back. It didn't cure the children. It didn't wash away the soot from the exclamations of commentators who continued to hand out one-click sentences. It did something else. It gave time back its weight. The court ruled probation, confiscation of most of his assets, restrictions on his activities in the financial sector. The newspapers called it a hard defeat and a soft victory. Elias called it the beginning of a punishment that equals a chance. He sold the penthouse, moved to a regular house in an area where the wind didn't know the taste of luxurious facades. Mia launched the Transparent Grants Fund, a platform where every dollar has a story, available in one click. They argued about principles, about pace, about limits. They laughed, rarely, but in a way that made the laughter sound like music that had no falsehood. Sometimes at night, Elias would open his old laptop and listen to Jeremy's voice. "We've crossed the line." He would answer into the void. "I'm coming back. Do you regret it?" Mia had asked once as they walked past the school stadium. The children ran like planets that didn't yet know about gravity. "I regret thinking that truth is a tool," he said. "It's a territory. If you stand on it, it holds. If you trade on it, it collapses." He had met several families whose silence had been bought. Not all of them needed his money or his apologies. Some simply needed a stage on which they could be heard. He stood by and kept quiet when they needed to be quiet, and spoke when they were asked to say, "I'm guilty." There was no catharsis in that simple phrase, but there was work, daily, ugly, honest. At one of these meetings, his son came up and hugged him quietly, without pathos, without theater, like a note that falls precisely on fate. "Is it possible to be rich and honest?" He asked once aloud, not to anyone in particular, but to the evening that knew how to listen. "You can be honest and then decide how much wealth this honesty will withstand," Mia answered. "It's not a formula. It's a choice every day." Elias looked at the city. Now it didn't look like an aquarium. More like space. Black, deep, with rare stars in the windows. What's more important, truth or success? The question did not disappear. Now he knew differently. Success without truth is noise that yesterday seemed like music. Truth without success is silence that gives a chance to hear yourself. Between them, a person who falls and learns to walk again. Can the past be redeemed? Probably not. But you can stop renting it out to the future. He didn't become a saint. He didn't become a poor preacher, and he didn't get his halo back. He became a man who chooses one thing every morning, not to outsource the truth. And that was his newfound wealth, unassuming but heavier than all the crystal chandeliers in the world. He looked up at the dark sky and saw a cold star trembling somewhere beyond the clouds. The message beyond the stars was simple: all or nothing. It's always about you. And he answered in a whisper that could be heard far away in that silence. I choose everything.